Is my mic on? Can you guys hear me back there? Is everything good?
The floor is yours, Chris.
Right,
Take
good.
it.
All right, so this is the Future Programming 2025. So I listened to everyone's 10 seconds. Raise your hand if you write code. Okay, if your hand is not up, you know this is about programming, right? Just making sure before we all start. It'll be fun. All right. So there's essentially 4 talks that I give. I keep them up to date. So once a quarter, I'll refresh all of them. I go around and I give them. This talk, I completely scrapped because I had to start over, and we'll get into why everything really has changed recently. But the other thing is Neil is very gracious and lets me do the first time I deliver a deck in public to you guys. So we're all going to work through this together. And if there's like blind spots or like you run into issues or you're like, I don't understand, come up and tell me later. Because I'll refine this, and then at some point at some conference you'll see me doing a future programming talk, and then you'll sit in and you'll be like, it's a completely different thing. It's so much better. Yes, and that's the point. That's why we do these things, right? Okay, so last year I did this talk, so I predicted a whole bunch of things in how things are going to work, and I like to be held accountable. Here there's things I predicted. The SWE bench, which is a sort of a measure as to how good models are against human programmers. I just did some back of the napkin calculations and realized we should be, based on the trajectory that the models were on, we should be about 100% by December of 25. So that's next month. We're at 78%. So we're not terribly, we were at 34 back then, so like we're doing okay, we're trending okay. I'll count that as sort of a win. Then we talked about open source would be sort of still lagging behind the billions of dollars being put into closed source models. If you think of OpenAI and Anthropic and Google Gemini, like those are the easy ones everyone knows. There's a ton of other large models out there that you can use. So the gap between how good they are, I said that there would be probably still some lag coming into that, whereas the open source models are almost in parity with the large foundation models that are out there right now. So I'll count that as a loss. The context window size, I talked about, context window, which is sort of the measure of the memory for the conversation that you're currently in with your language model. Talked about, that's going to get up to 200,000 tokens, which seems like a lot. Turns out one model was just dropped that has a 10 million token window. 10 million tokens, if you do some back of the napkin calculations, is you could take War and Peace, Moby Dick, and Pride and Prejudice, put that into the context window, and it will know the difference between those 3 things in a single conversation. So that's a lot of memory that we can work with in a single chat. And then computer use, I said, was probably a little bit far away. And by computer use, I mean letting AI sort of take over your computer and do things on it. It was starting last year, but it's come a long way. So it actually was faster than expected. So let's go to this one. So let's talk about the shift in applications. I'm going to say the old way because that was what we were doing about 6 months ago. Right? So if you think about what we build and how you normally use computers currently, right? You have some sort of interface like your phone, and you pick the app you want to use and you use the app you want to use. Or you go to your desktop and you have to find the application that you want to turn on. You turn on that application and you use it. And there's this concept of like, I click a button, something happens. I fill in a text box and click a button, something else happens. And it's this very sort of structured, like UI designers. How many UI designers do we have? Just one? Okay, I'm going to talk about UI designers then. UI designers spend an incredible amount of time worrying about the curvature of buttons and some of those kind of things, right? That is very important when your world looks like this, where what the user interface has to guide me as a person to be able to use it, understand it with no training, know to click on the right button, be able to work through a process. That process then talks to some data services or some APIs on the back end, and then I get a result, whether it's a record stored in a database or my delivery from Uber Eats. Doesn't matter, right? All right, what we're building now, and this is sort of how we think architecturally about solving the problems today, is I will have a conversation with AI. How many of you use either ChatGPT or Anthropic or Google Gemini? Excellent. So you do this now, you may not realize it, but what you're doing is you're having a conversation not directly with the language model, but into a series of ecosystems of smaller models that will interpret what you want to do. And then what happens is it will pass that off to a system of other agents and other models. Those all do work amongst themselves. You don't realize that's happening, and you get a result back. So you're not talking to a thing, you're talking to many things. And the systems we're designing now work the same way. I don't want to build a system with a user interface that allows someone to click on a button or forces, I'm going to say forces because it seems like it's bad if I say forces. It forces you to click on a button and then something happens and it's a very transactional process. What I really want is the system to solve a problem for me. I can do that by building agentic systems where I can have a conversation with AI that can understand me. It passes that context of understanding off to other systems. They all do work, they all solve my problem, and then they either come back with a result or my problem's been solved. These are the systems we're building now. So this isn't like the future, this would have been the future last year. This is the software we're building now. All right, so 8 weeks ago, I realized I had to throw away that previous deck. I couldn't even keep the trajectory through the deck, which just talked about tools and technologies and those kind of things. Because 8 weeks ago, in June of last year, we would choose a development environment. And whether that be Windsurf or VS Code or Cursor, it didn't matter. Then we'd have to go decide what language models we wanted to use in order to do the code that we wanted to write. So even if you're using Lovable for vibe coding, you would go pick the model you want to use, and a lot of people would just default to either whatever they came with, or it didn't matter. But this was the process we used to do. Pick a tool you liked. I was a Cursor person. And then pick some models you like. I like Sonnet and Haiku. And then you went forward, and that's sort of what you did. But every developer could do a different thing. Your teams did different things. But in September, so many things happened that it's changed how we do work. And I'm just going to go over this little chart real quick. So this is from September 28th to November 18th, right? All right, so let's go through it. So Anthropic dropped Agent SDK in Code 2.0, which is fundamentally changed that dynamic of I've got one tool to sort of write code, and then one set of models that I would talk to, and those would go back and forth. So Claude stepped into that and said, hey, we're going to change how that all worked. So on September 28th, they dropped that, which all the developers in the Claude ecosystem went, this is great. I can now do things like offline. I can ask Claude to make a change for me. I can be on my phone. I can walk away or take my phone with me. I don't have to be chained to a laptop anymore to write code. The systems could start doing that for me. Not to be outdone, like a week later, OpenAI has OpenAI Developer Day, and OpenAI dropped AgentKit, Codex, and the apps SDKs. So all those same tools are now available on both the Anthropic side and on the OpenAI side. So you have these two very dominant model vendors start to step into the software development tools space. Arguably, you can have a conversation that said the reason why Microsoft did so well is because they built a whole bunch of software development tools that gave us the ability to build on top of their platform. So if Microsoft hadn't built all those development tools, the whole way back to Visual Basic 3, if they hadn't built all those development tools, it would have been much harder to build applications on top of Windows. Some other operating system may have won. All right? That's sort of how it worked. So both Anthropic and OpenAI now stepping into the development tools space, going, hey, developers, instead of doing that thing you used to do, let's give you the tools that you need to do it to go compete and build your software. It's like, all right. October 15th, a week later, Claude released Haiku 4, which is cheaper, faster, and just as good as all the previous models. So now we're like, okay, so now we start seeing this little arms race happen. And then a day later, Anthropic released Skills. How many have you used Skills yet at all? Okay, I would advise you, as a casual bystander, you should go learn how to use Anthropic Skills. All right. So what Skills did prior to this is Anthropic released something called MCP, which was a open protocol that allowed language models to talk to tool systems and be able to then use tools. So if you use OpenAI's desktop, or you use Claude's desktop, and you connect it to your Gmail, or you connect it to your calendar, or you connect it to Notion, you can ask it questions and it can have a conversation with those other systems. That's using MCP. We all know that there was a set of problems with MCP, and the problem was MCP was sort of like in the Apollo 13, the big NASA movies, they would go and take a big huge binder off a shelf and they'd put it on a table and they'd start leafing through it to find the answer or the schematic that they were looking for. Well, MCP is a lot like that. The language model gets the giant binder, and then it has to go figure out what it needs inside that giant binder, and then it has to figure out how to actually use it. Well, that's a lot of context, right? You have to read the entire binder and then figure out where you want the thing in the binder, and then you have to get to use it. Skills, they gave it to the consumers, but developers immediately realized skills are nice because instead of that giant binder, I can just talk about part of that binder, and I can give it code that it can execute, because executing code is faster than if a language model has to write code to execute on its own. So my failure rate is much smaller if I'm using Skills versus using MCP. All right? So that happened a day later. 4 days after that, Anthropic launched their Claude Code for web and iOS, meaning that I can just go to an app now and tell Claude Code what I want. It will it'll fire up its own computer, so I don't need to be at my computer. It'll fire up its own computer, it'll start writing the code, and it can check that code into my repository where I store my code. And then I can ask it again and again and again to do different features, and it will do that work on its own computing and then check those in. Now, that is exactly what Codex does on OpenAI. So now you have these two massive tool vendors or language model vendors producing tools that don't even require you to have your own computer now. So you can ask it to do something, it will write code on its own, check it in. You can ask it about the code it just wrote. It will analyze the code it wrote. It'll write more code, so you can ask it feature after feature after feature without you sitting in a computer typing anything. All right? Then OpenAI announces the Atlas agentic browser. So Perplexity had a browser out there called Comet, and Comet allowed you to go to a web page and ask questions about the web page. Not super revolutionary. But what Comet was also good at is you could give Comet a command that says, like, find me flights from Columbus to Maui between these dates, and I want the cheapest one. And it will actually use your browser, drive your browser, click on all the buttons for you, and then come back with the result. So it was able to actually use your browser on your computer. Well, OpenAI announced Atlas, which now allows you to do that as well. So now OpenAI now is saying, okay, not only do we want to step into the developer space, but what we really want to do is also step into that consumer space that says, you're just going to come to OpenAI, ask us a question. It doesn't matter whether I have to search the web, use your computer, and if the question is, can you order me something from Uber Eats? These browsers can actually do that work. And they can find where you want the food, what food you want, it'll ask you questions, and then it'll get the entire way up to do the transaction. And since it's a browser, it will stop the screen and allow you to put in your credit card, so you're not giving the language model your credit card. And then you say go, and it will take back over and complete the rest of the transaction. So then, yesterday, Google, as you can see, is missing from this entire thing. It's like, well, where's Google? They were falling farther and farther and farther behind, and people were starting to give up on Google. But Google yesterday released Gemini 3, and they released something called anti-gravity. And anti-gravity is a browser that takes, or a tool that takes all these other tools, like Anthropic's SDKs and Code 2, and OpenAI's Codex. It takes all those ideas and puts them in one place. So if you download anti-gravity from Google, you can do agentic development, you can do independent development where I'm still writing code. You can do the, hey, I'm offline, just go do this for me, and it'll fire up a virtual machine and write the code for me and then come back and tell me when it's done. And Gemini 3, not hyperbole, Gemini 3 is significantly better than even GPT 5.1. And I've only had probably about 2 hours to actually use it. But I've talked to some of the Google guys online that I know, and we went back and forth on some of the prototypes that they've been working on. And so Gemini, or Google, just now came into this market as like hot. I don't know why they waited so long. I mean, it's been 8 weeks. You'd think that they'd be out there already, right? It's crazy. All right, so what does this mean for you guys? All right, so the first one, looking across this, Cursor and Windsurf, those tools that we used to use to write code, they're all being replaced by these large organizations coming in and going, you don't need to use that, you could just use ours. Now, what's interesting is Cursor, Windsurf, and all these other tools are based on another tool called VS Code, which is an open source tool. That's the one we all used to use anyway until they started adding some of these agent tools into our IDE. But Cursor and Windsurf are going to have to figure out how to keep up. Because if these large vendors start coming into the development space and providing us the development tools, why would I need to spend $20 a month on a wrapper to something that I'm getting almost for free? Or it's included in my other models. All right. So what you really need to think about is, are we using OpenAI? Are we using Anthropic? Are we using Google? And this is going to turn into something like the AWS. How many of you are cloud familiar, like cloud service, Amazon, AWS? Okay, good. So this is going to turn into something like AWS versus Azure versus GCP. Like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft are the three big cloud vendors that you would think of using now. So now it's going to turn into, am I an OpenAI shop? Am I an Anthropic shop? Or am I a Google shop? Yes?
Where is xAI's Grok 4.1 that just got? Or does that relate to this?
No. Yeah, so those are just independent models. Grok has not stepped into this arena of helping developers. They're out there, building essentially the Twitter bots kind of like stuff. But from a enterprise development perspective, they're not on the scene. Yeah. All right. So you have a 3 ecosystem problem, right? I'll tell you how to think about them. I see Eric got the thing. Yeah. All right. So the OpenAI ecosystem is AI everywhere. That's their thinking. If you think about the tool set and how OpenAI has positioned themselves and how easy it is to use, what they are really looking for through AgentKit, Codex, their Apps SDK, their desktop app, the new models that have come out, they are best for startups, consumer products, and non-developer teams. So if you're a developer, like in a startup, OpenAI is a great place to start. You can look at these tools and start using them. Larger development teams probably aren't going to use OpenAI, but their philosophy is mass distribution. They have 800 million daily users, and what they're doing is they're building the development tools that we can work with directly into chat. So if I'm in ChatGPT and I say, hey, I need a hotel, go, it's going to go find the hotel vendors that have plugged SDKs in, and it will be able to natively have those conversations and then bring back data to the user that says, hey, I found these things, right? So if you're in, like I said, a startup, because it's very fast, but if you're in consumer products or you're selling to the public, you would be starting to look at OpenAI and think about, like, is that the ecosystem that I want to use? All right. Anthropic is about developers. Anthropic is a team of developers. That's what they do. So Anthropic stack, skills, agent SDK, Anthropic is the one that wrote MCP. So they're the ones that came up with the protocol that everyone else now is using. So they are very engineering focused. So Anthropic is best for professional developers, very complex problems, or if you have safety or you want high control. So the development teams I work for, both at Transform Labs and at Lena Health, we are a Claude shop. So those are the tools that we use. We've adopted their ecosystem. That's what we're using. We have an AI team that is tasked with all the R&D. Like, so we use the OpenAI tools. We use the Gemini tools. Like I said, I spent the better part of yesterday evening after the release working with it and running it through a bunch of prototypes. But the Anthropic has been proven by a couple of examples here. Deloitte just rolled out Anthropic to its 470,000 employees. They've chosen Anthropic. So you'll start to see organizations do this. It's no longer like, hey, whatever you have a personal account that you're using is fine. Organizations will start lining up into the specific ecosystem that they want their employees to use. All right, and then the Google ecosystem. This slide changed last night. Like this morning, I was like, oh, what am I going to do here, right? Because anti-gravity and Gemini 3 just took over almost all of the Google ecosystem. Agentic development, individual code line development, offline development, like all of it is now in anti-gravity, and it is a great tool. It's also built on Visual Studio Code, so it's not something crazy that they wrote on their own like Google will do sometimes. They took an existing standard, they put a bunch of money into it, and then they built this tool on top of it that does everything that OpenAI does and everything that Claude does. They all three are now in parity. So when would you use the Google stack? If you're already a Google customer, you would use the Google stack because they've now caught up. Google was always good about, they always had a good story to tell about safety and control and some of those kind of things. But I think that we'll see a lot more coming out when anti-gravity gets more. I mean, it was just released, great fanfare. A lot of tools will come out, and that day, developers like me will pick it up, we'll run it through some paces, and we're like, this is amazing, I love it. And then we'll find out what all the faults are in about 4 or 5 days. So you guys are just way too ahead of the industry right now. Good job, right? All right. All right, but what you should really do is follow the money, right? So the who backs whom patterns, like where, we talk about, billions and billions and billions of dollars moving around in here. It's like all three of these have now lined up on these massive systems and how they work. So, but where are they getting all this money? So you've got Microsoft, who's always been with OpenAI, and OpenAI powers most. Until recently, until 2 weeks ago, OpenAI powered all of the Microsoft stuff. Microsoft just let Anthropic into that ecosystem, so now as a developer, I can pick either Anthropic or OpenAI while I'm writing code inside the Azure environment. Let's see, Amazon backed Anthropic. Okay, cool. Even though Amazon has its own development stack, they backed Anthropic. Because why would you only bet against or for yourself when you can hedge your bet with someone that's going to win? Google also backs Anthropic. Plus, Google has its own Gemini. Plus, Google powers its own now anti-gravity system. So now Google is also dumping money into Anthropic, right? And then yesterday, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Anthropic announced a strategic alliance. Where, let's see, who's it about? $30 billion of compute capacity for Microsoft's Azure Cloud is going to be given to both NVIDIA and to Anthropic. And then NVIDIA is going to invest another $10 billion And Microsoft's putting another $5 billion. See, these numbers seem small now. Like they're only putting $5 billion in. How serious are they? Right? Right? And Anthropic. Right? So you can sort of look at the money and go, okay, there's a lot of money going behind Anthropic at the enterprise level. OpenAI is out on their own going after the consumer space, and Google is being Google. Right? They put money into everybody, but they're still building their own stuff because they've got a war chest to be able to do that. Right? So as we talk about those ecosystems, why am I not talking about Grok? Why am I not talking about Llama? Why am I not talking about Meta? Right? It's because of this. Because they're just not participating at the level that the other ones are. All right, so sort of the bottom line is choose this if you need this and why you would do that. All right, so all those slides, I could have just shown this slide and we talked about it a little bit, but it is what it is, right? All right, so what should you guys do? And I'll go lightly over your team's homework, but essentially, my opinion, but I'm your speaker, so it carries a lot of weight, right? All right. My opinion is you should pick one of these and use it pretty in depth. Like I jump around between them because I have to understand them and where the edges are and all those kind of. But my recommendation to anybody else is, unless you do the kind of work I do, which is to spend an inordinate amount of time keeping up on whatever's going on, right? But if you have actual work to do, what you should do is you should go for one of these and figure out if it's the right tool. Right? Sort of based on this chart. And what are you trying to accomplish? All right? Then we talk about, that right now teams are using multiple tools at the same time, which is inefficient for a team. I can't share specs, I can't share design, I can't share techniques, I can't share prompts, because everyone on the team is doing something different. We want to collapse that down into a single ecosystem that our team does. It doesn't matter which one right now, but pick one and don't be schizophrenic across all of them as a team. All right? All right. To be young and insane, let's talk about vibe coding for a minute. All right? So what most developers were doing, we'll go over this quickly, is they type random prompts into ChatGPT, they cut and paste response, there's no structure, there's no results, it didn't scale. And then, tools like Lovable and Windsurf and some of the others came around. So then what happened is they'd use an IDE, they'd ask the LLM to write code, but still there was no structure, no planning. The results, you can't reproduce the work that gets done. If you started over and said, I want to do the exact same thing, it would turn out a different way, right? That kind of consistency doesn't work at the enterprise. We must be able to be consistent. So then we went through the era of chatbots, which is the old way, 9 weeks ago. You would say, write me a login function, and it would generate some code, and you could either cut and paste it or approve it in your IDE, and you'd be done in 2 minutes, but then you'd spend the rest of your time debugging the code that it wrote, right? So what do we want to do now? Which is, I want you to implement some part of my system. That thing will design its work process, like it will think through what it wants to do, it'll create task lists for itself, it will then start executing on that task list, it'll come back and ask for input, but it could be done in a few minutes. I'm surprised sometimes. I kicked one off this morning, I haven't checked, but it wasn't done after an hour and a half, and I thought maybe it locked up, and it was like, nope, I'm still burning tokens. So I was like, all right, I'll find out when I get home what transpired. And this was the Google Gemini anti-gravity one, right? I just kicked it off with a very complex thing that I normally will start with, and we'll see where it actually goes. All right. So the difference here is single turn versus multi-turn. Like that first graph, I said, hey, you have a conversation with the AI. AI then orchestrates it and runs across multiple systems and does work until it's done. This is what we're now doing using these tools. All right. So what can they really do? They can really, like Sonnet 4.5 has a 30-hour context window, meaning it will take on a problem and continue working on it, and they will cut it off after 30 hours. So they will give you a machine, it runs, it works on its own, like it's not my laptop sitting there for 30 hours, it's some machine on the cloud that's running for 30 hours. And then it will come back and be like, I'm done, here's what I did. And it has gone back and forth and checked its own code and checked in code and run the code and tested itself. And like it runs. It's not just like write a function, here's some code. It's a long running process, which is what we're getting now. All right. Our computer use, we talked about this a little bit. Claude, Gemini, and OpenAI now all have computer use. It can see your screen. So when you're asking it questions and working with it, it used to be, again, 9 weeks ago, I would say something like, hey, I need you to add a button to this screen. Because we like small surgical tasks, not these long-running kind of things. So I add a button to the screen. It would add a button, but it wouldn't look right. It would be in a different place. It wouldn't look right. But now these tools allow it to open up a browser and actually check its own work and realize, just like a human would, that button doesn't look like all the other buttons. It's not in the right place. It's got different edges around it. It doesn't say the right words. And then it will correct it and continue working on it. So it has the ability to browse the web, just like you would, to look at the software that it's producing and then correct itself, which is what we want. How to work with agents and not vibe code. There's 3 good ways to do this. And they're all out there. They're all free. All right? One's called BMAD, one's called GitHub Spec Kit, and then the other one's called OpenSpec. And this is a way that you can tell instead of just a prompt where you go, build me an app, this is a way that you can have a conversation that builds up some documentation that when you say, okay, go build that app, it's enough context that the computer can take over and do it for you. It's sort of like when we would have a BA and a QA person and a product manager all sit with the development team and go, this is what we want, and then hand it over to the developers, right?
So, I mean, I remember earlier times when you presented.
Hold it. Sure. Start over.
So, in earlier presentations, I feel like you were talking about AI as an intern that is trainable. And now it sort of feels like AI is serving as Scrum Master. Is that an apt way of looking at it?
I have an entire set of slides in about 3 slides for this. Yes. All right.
Eric was a good plant for
He
you
was.
right there, right? Yeah, all right.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about what do we currently use AI for, and then we'll get into that one. So there's some studies that were done, like how do developers use AI right now, which I always find interesting when we come up with these things. But essentially, developers use AI to do a couple of things over and over again. One is debugging, like, hey, why doesn't my code work? Or you'll get an error screen in your browser and you'll just cut and paste that whole thing into a chat and go, what's wrong? And it will like tell you what's wrong, and then it will go ahead and fix it. Refactoring existing code. Understanding is one of the things it's good at. I can ask it, what does this do and how would I make it better? And it will come back with good results, right? Mid-loop code generation, filling in the gaps. Hey, I've got part of the system structured, build the rest of it exactly like I built this part, and it will be able to continue on and follow your leads. It is very, very good at test case generation, where if we want to test the code that's being written, we need to write test cases. It could read the code and then write appropriate test cases, and then I could read the test cases and make sure that those are accurate, and then I could say, go ahead and build code to run those test cases, and it will build that code. So I'm not asking it to change the code that I'm working on that's going to go in production. What I'm asking it to do is build a bunch of code that tests my code. So we use that now. And then learning new techniques. This is great. I can look at open source projects that I don't understand, or like I really want to understand like how they did the caching or how they did their network services or whatever. And I could go, hey, here's a repo, here's a set of code that has that thing solved. Tell me how they solved that problem. And it will give me a like, here's how they did that, here's the tools they used, which is very handy to learn. So the first two are about improving code. The second one is about debugging and refactoring, those kind of things. But none of them were, here, write my entire app. All right. So we still have a trust gap. So 76% of developers use AI coding assistants. That'd be Cursor, Windsurf, whatever the tool is that they're currently using. But only 43% actually trust the code that gets written, which is healthy. in my opinion. I don't believe the AI is writing good code until I know that it wrote good code by me looking at it, which also creates a problem for vibe coders who may not be programmers who have to assume that the code that they've written is good. But out of professional developers, about only 43% trust the accuracy. So think about that when you're building code, right, or software. What developers report, they use it 82% daily. It's got a 26% productivity boost, and then the 65% cite missing context as the number one issue, which is the problem that we're trying to solve with both MCP and skills. And like there's all kinds of tool updates that are coming out specifically to solve that problem, which is if I have a context window that gets littered because it has decided to make tool calls that it didn't need to make, it keeps all those tool calls in its memory, and later on when I ask it to do something, it has to figure out, was that tool call useful or not useful? Maybe I should do that one again, and it will try making all those same tool calls incorrectly again and again and again. That's a problem, right? Because it wastes tokens and it litters the context window. So cleaning up context windows or making sure that the question that I'm asking and managing is more accurate. All right. So now we will shift from coder to orchestrator. So all these changes that we're talking about from a development perspective, yes, 6 months ago I would have said treat it like an intern. It knows nothing, it will be wrong most of the time. But now, with the tools and the models getting larger and the models getting more intelligent, we can actually have it do some of this work on itself, especially if we start building agents. So like I've got refactoring agents that we use, I've got QA and test agents that we use, and I've got check-in or code quality agents that we use. And we will fire those agents up, and whether that's a tool-based software development or a human-based software development, all go through the same pipeline. So that way I can check to see if the code that's actually making it into production is good code. Because I now have a set of agents that are looking at the entire pipeline from development through check-in, through the entire process, through QA into production, right? So this is where we're actually starting to shift time. So this is to the developers, and especially intern, like new developers that are in CS come to me all the time and go, am I going to have a job, right? So here's the skills that AI won't do. These are the skills you should foster in yourself, right? These are the human skills. Long horizon planning, ethical judgment, creative problem framing, the stakeholder communication, including politics. AI is not good at that, turns out. Adaptability, and then your judgment and context, not the code you write, is the important part of your, like every developer's human skill set. Right?
I don't see any task-oriented, information technology, functions there. In other words, why get an information technology degree anymore when you're just going to act like an internal quality control, blah, blah, blah. Right? Get my point?
So the question was, he didn't see any specific technologies. Like none of those things on the human skill list talked specifically about why you should get into CS, right? Here's my next slide. All right, so there are parallel career tracks, not just levels. It used to be we would think of junior developer, mid-level developer, senior developer. Okay, on the data science, you sort of had junior data science people, and you get into analytics, and but everyone had this progression. Like in the old days, I had to start from the bottom and learn and work my way up and into an organization, right? But every developer right now should baseline using these AI assistants daily, verify their output, and understand what they're doing. However, what you should do is specialize in one of these 5 columns. You don't have to do all of them, but these are the 5 columns that you need to be paying attention to. One is software development. That was the easy one. That's what we all used to do. It's like, oh, I'm a CS degree. I write code. I get into a program. I'm a junior programmer. I'm an intern or whatever. Like I start writing code. People tell me how to write better code. They do code reviews on me. They work their way up. You can continue in that column. There is need for that type of resource, right? The things you should know if you're going to be in that column is what tools are out there, what frameworks are out there, and what models are out there. Because that's the thing you're going to be using. All right? The second thing is intelligent automation. So this is a new sort of wedge that has been created. We used to call it RPA or robotic process automation, right? But now there's new tools out there like N8N that you can step into a role that is an AI automation engineer. You may have never written a line of C# or Python or JavaScript, but you could have a career just doing automations using AI. And then it's about what tools and what connections, what do you understand the business processes and what models are you using to solve those, right? So it's a little bit different shift. Then you could get into this third column, which is sort of enterprise agents, which is when we talk about RAG or sort of large system development. This is not like your junior programmer building a RAG. So this is like real enterprise RAG systems. Any of your voice integration, like we've replaced IVR, that whole press 1 for this, press 2. You should never hear that again. If you do, that company's way behind. So what really should be going on is that you should be being talked to, and whether you know it's an AI person or you're not, I know that I have an irrigation system at my house, and I know that when I call in, that is AI. In fact, I'll make a conversation about where it's getting its data, and it completely ignores me because it's really just trying to schedule me for the next thing.
It's the big call, so you have to wait for between everything you say.
Oh, but the good ones now make them do ums and in just a second. Oh yes, they've solved that problem, right? If you're in this track, you should be paying attention to agent frameworks, not just tools, but what are the frameworks we're using to build agents? And then what cloud providers are out there and what are the tools that they're providing? There is a difference between AWS, Azure, and GCP. They all do very similar things, but if I have a conversation with an AWS person, I'll be like, I don't know what that, you just said skibbity-doo. I don't know what that tool is. They got 128 different things in their tool chest. It's but they all do the same thing. You just got to figure out what the pieces parts are and how they weave them together. But if you're going to be in this one, you should know what cloud providers, or stick one and become very good at it. Fine-tuning, which is another thing. So this is taking one of these large models and making it smarter for your particular client's need. So instead of, I just throw a PDF into chat and ask it questions, being able to take an OpenAI model and then give it auxiliary information, essentially retrain it, using not only the thing it knows, but super training it on the things you want it to know, and then use that model for the specific use case, right? That is something that's out there right now that you should know how to do if you want to be in this space, in this particular column, right? You need to know the models and how they actually get fine-tuned, all the workflows and methodologies and how to do training and data evaluation around fine-tuning. But this is a perfectly good space for someone coming out of CS to start. They don't have to start down there and work their way up this. They could start right here and become a fine-tuning expert. And people need that skill. People need those right now. And then your last one is model building. How do you actually build one of these things? And when is the right time for me to build one of these things? And I'm never going to build, I'm never going to spend, well, even the open source ones are $4 million to train a model. That's just compute. That's not even the human time. I'm not going to build a model of that size, but we build small models all the time to solve very specific tasks based on very specific data. They're not language models. They're not generative language models. They are the old school machine learning is still a skill that people need to do. So what tools do you actually use to do that? What methodologies? How do you collect data? How do you prep data? How do you label data? And then how do you actually build a model, right? This is not based on seniority. This isn't one of those oh, you have to start here and work your entire way up to here. That is not true. I'm an old guy. Just go watch any OpenAI video and realize those are 20-somethings building these models, right? They didn't start as a junior developer somewhere and work their way up through this track. Right? They started with, I am going to do this. And that's what they build. However, these are meta skills. It doesn't matter which one of those columns you're in, you should be very concerned about every single one of these columns. Security, how do you deploy the stuff? it doesn't do any good to be able to build something if you can't figure out how to deploy it. We have this conversation all the time. Token optimization. Why does one thing cost me $12,000 a month, but another thing costs me $27,000 a month to run? Like, well, that's a problem right there, token optimization. How do you figure out what's efficient? How do you figure out what enough is for a particular model? How do you figure out how to downgrade models until you get the one that meets the need but isn't the most expensive thing out there? Right? There's a lot of work that goes into that. These are spaces that everyone in the development field should be paying attention to. Your tool maintenance, like in the last 8 weeks, we just changed our entire tooling around. How do you know when you should upgrade? How do you know when you should jump to the next model? Because GPT 4.0 and 5.1 and Gemini 3 and Haiku 4.5 all respond differently to different prompts. So how do you just willy-nilly change them because that's the latest one? Like, when do you use the older ones? When do you stick on models? When do you really want to understand the version, the specific version of the model you're using? We do a lot of voice at Lena Health. We use a very specific older version of 11 Labs because it's consistent with all the other voice that we've produced. I don't want version 3 of 11 Labs. I want the version of the model of the specific version that I've been using in order to maintain that. Well, that's in our tool maintenance. How do you even know what's going on inside these agentic systems? And then, of course, how do you test it? And what's the real testing process? Everyone should be aware of this in the engineering space, in the software development space. And I don't care whether you're vibe coding it or you're a team of 50 engineers that are deep into it. Everyone on your team, you should be able to have a conversation about every single one of these columns, and they should have some clue as to what you're talking about, right? And as a developer, that's our job, is to learn into this space. Yeah?
Question, Chris. So with security, you have linkage and key management. What about like the guardrails and the guidelines? Because a lot of security people aren't really going to know what that AI tool was supposed to do, right? So what would be your recommendation with understanding what the guardrails and the guidelines are around the data?
Yeah, so there's two sides of that question, right? What is the specific organization's guardrails, like what's acceptable use of any particular methodology or tool? When do I use a closed version of a model versus an open version of a model? When do I use local inference versus cloud inference? Like, you're going to have to, on a case-by-case basis, sort of walk through those. And that's what I'm talking about with leakage is, in fact, I was at a meeting Tuesday, and a company's entire job, the thing that the startup is spinning up, is the ability to watch everyone's conversations with AI and know when PII, PHI, or protected information based on some product is being leaked out to open models. That's the entire startups, and they're funded. So there's venture capitalists putting money into that startup, and that's the only thing that they're doing is watching you use the tools. It's like, all right, yeah.
In your opinion, is there really such thing as security anymore? It was, in my opinion, is there security anymore? In my opinion, there is contractual security. I can have a contract with, for instance, Azure, Microsoft. If I'm buying enough premium services, they will guarantee me that the conversation I'm having with them is inside my virtual cloud, my VCP, as well as the models that I'm using are not being retrained on any of my data. So from a contract perspective, yes, I can say that I'm secure in this transaction. Now, how would I know if they were doing, like, I don't know. How do you know your bank's not actually selling your right? Yeah. That's the purpose of the question.
Yeah. Yes.
About 5 years ago.
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, when I started talking about this, the comments were then we needed about 7 times the energy that we had then. So how is the energy keeping up with the production?
In my other talk, I specifically go into energy production, water consumption, those kind of things.
I think AEP Ohio came out with numbers that said, and I can't remember, it had to be gigawatts, but they had a capacity, and I'm going to make numbers up right now, but from a scale perspective, they're probably accurate. Like, they have a capacity of 28 gigawatts. They have a current supply demand of like 17, but the new data centers that are being allocated, they're being requested to come up with 40 gigawatts. They don't know how they're going to solve that energy problem, right? So that is actually a problem. So eventually, we're not going to be able to build more data centers because we would have to turn off all of our electricity to run the data center, at which point I can't get to the model, so what's the point, right? So, all right. I think we're in the home stretch. What should you do? I'm going to go over this pretty quickly. This week, as a developer, you should talk about your ecosystem with your team. You should commit to one. You should create some simple tools to understand the edges of them. And then you should start to come up with some structured coding methodologies and avoid unstructured code, all right? And like figuring out how to use OpenSpec takes about 7 minutes. It's not hard. It's not like, oh, you need a PhD to read this stuff. It's like, oh, this makes sense, like many things. So what should you do this month? You should complete a production-ready AI project. You should understand your ecosystem's integration into all the rest of the things that you needed to integrate into. And then you should become proficient in agent orchestration, because what people sometimes didn't understand is, like, when you get in your Tesla and drive down the road, that's not one model. That is many, many, many models working together to drive you down the road, right? So agent orchestration is the same thing. It's not one agent that does everything I want it to do. It is multiple agents that do that. So how do you set up an orchestration system that actually does that work? And then what's your long-term strategy? Stick to the fundamentals. They never go obsolete. Understand the algorithms, the data structures and system design, architectural thinking, and then communication with shareholders and stakeholders. It used to be we would joke that, because I'm getting to the age now where I could probably grow a beard and be that guy who you just like didn't talk to. But I think it's important, we used to like make the joke that we just slide pizza under the data center room door and then work gets done, and we don't like, that era of someone being able to be that disconnected from their business and all the other people that they're working with are over. So from a skills perspective, being able to communicate and interact with the rest of the business and not just be the IT guy is going to be important. Pick an ecosystem and go deep, and then your adaptability. Ecosystems will change, right? Don't be frenetic about it, but at the same time, be willing to move if it makes sense for your organization to move. All right, we'll do 5 quick predictions. Agents will be everywhere. The ecosystem consolidation will happen. So most companies will standardize on a vendor. You're not going to see companies that are like very large companies, like, I don't know, Cardinal, right, who are on AWS and GCP and Azure because every department could do their own thing. They'll have a hard time standardizing because every single one of those departments will still have autonomy to do those kind of things. But at the same time, most organizations will start to consolidate onto a single one, just like we did AWS, Azure, and GCP. Cursor and Windsurf are going to have to adapt and figure out where they play in this market, or they're going to die out. And then costs will get cheaper for better intelligence. I pay about the same amount now for the models that I use that I paid 8 months ago for models that are not quite as intelligent as the models now. So while I'm paying about the same, my models are getting smarter and smarter and smarter, which to me means it's going to be cheaper to do better intelligence. Because I could always back down to some of those smaller models if I don't need the effort that large models. I don't need thinking and reasoning models. I need faster models. And what you're seeing is even OpenAI in the GPT-5.1 released high, medium, low, micro. So I could pick smaller models that are cheaper to run inference on and get away with it. All right. And then multimodal, voice first. It will understand images, text, video. It doesn't matter. The models are getting smarter at that kind of thing. So your bottom line, this is the wrap up. So I'm 5 minutes over. I'm sorry, Neil. So use AI.
You did better this time.
Yeah, thank you. So choose your vendor ecosystem, pick one and go deep, stop vibe coding, but start using structured methodologies. I'm not saying don't use vibe coding tools, but stop just hoping that it will figure it out. Tell it what you really want. And then from coder to orchestrator, right? It handles junior work, and now it's handling more and more. And then for your career, pick a lane and progress that lane, right? At the end of all these slide decks, what I'll normally do is I'll feed the entire slide deck into some AI tool and say, give me a picture. And this is the picture it came up with this time. Apparently, I prefer Anthropic. And it knew that for some reason, so there you go. Okay. So I run Columbus AI. It's at columbus-ai.com. We have about 1,800 members. We meet once a month. Between 30 to 60 people will show up. On Tuesday, this next Tuesday, the 25th, we will be at Rev 1 at 6 o'clock. Go here. You can go to the meetup. This one is AI in the arts. We have some very dynamic speakers, including Dr. Keith, who are going to do talks. And then in December, we're just doing a holiday gathering. There's no speakers. We're just going to get together. It's going to be at the Loft downtown. It's Transform Lab space. There may be adult beverages and food. And you just come and hang out and talk to everyone who's interested in AI, right? And no agenda. And then we'll kick January off with speakers again. All right. And this is me.